The rain hammered against the tall windows of the Westbrook mansion like thousands of tiny fists demanding entry. Inside the grand foyer, Maria clutched her worn canvas bag against her chest as she waited for someone to acknowledge her presence. The marble floors gleamed so brightly she could see her reflection, a young black woman in a faded blue dress that had seen better days. She had arrived 15 minutes early for her first day of work, not wanting to make a bad impression on the family that had hired her as their new maid. The mansion stretched out before her like a museum, filled with paintings in golden frames and furniture that probably cost more than her mother's entire house back in Detroit. Maria had moved to New York City 3 months ago with nothing but a suitcase and a dream of making enough money to support her younger siblings back home. Her mother had died 2 years earlier from cancer, leaving Maria, at 24, to become the family's breadwinner. Her father had disappeared when she was 6, leaving behind only a single photograph and memories that grew hazier with each passing year. A sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "You must be the new maid." Maria turned to see a tall woman with silver hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face. The woman wore a black dress with a white collar, and her eyes scanned Maria from head to toe with the precision of a customs inspector. "I'm Mrs. the head housekeeper. You're early." Maria nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am. I didn't want to be late on my first day." Mrs.'s expression didn't soften, but something flickered in her eyes that might have been approval. "Follow me. I'll show you where you'll be working and explain your duties. The Westbrook family expects perfection. Mr. Alexander Westbrook is one of the wealthiest men in New York, and he has very high standards." As Maria followed the older woman through corridors lined with artwork and antiques, she learned the layout of her new workplace. The mansion had 42 rooms spread across 4 floors, including a library, a music room, a gymnasium, an indoor pool, and quarters for the 12 staff members who kept everything running smoothly. Maria's primary responsibilities would include cleaning the East Wing guest rooms, helping in the kitchen when needed, and ensuring the music room remained pristine. The music room made Maria's breath catch in her throat when Mrs. opened its double doors. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a manicured garden, illuminating a grand piano in the center of the room. But what drew Maria's attention was the glass cabinet along the far wall, housing a collection of violins. Even from across the room, she could tell they were valuable, their wood polished to a deep, rich glow. "Mr. Westbrook collects rare instruments," Mrs. explained, noticing Maria's gaze. "You are never, under any circumstances, to touch those violins. They are worth millions of dollars. Your job is simply to dust the cabinet once a week and ensure the room stays clean. Do you understand?" Maria nodded, though her fingers itched with a longing she hadn't felt in years. She hadn't held a violin since her mother's funeral, when she had been forced to sell her own instrument to pay for the burial costs. Music had been her first love, her escape, her language when words failed. Her mother had scraped together money from 3 jobs to pay for lessons when Maria was 7, recognizing a gift that deserved nurturing. For 10 years, Maria had practiced daily, dreaming of concert halls and standing ovations. She had even won a scholarship to a prestigious music program, but when her mother got sick, those dreams dissolved like sugar in rain. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of instructions and introductions. Maria met the other staff members, a diverse group who seemed kind enough, though cautious around the new hire. Cook, a robust woman named, warned her that Mr. Westbrook rarely left his study and preferred not to interact with the household staff. "He's been like a ghost since his wife died 5 years ago," whispered while kneading bread dough. "Keeps to himself, doesn't entertain guests. It's sad, really." This house used to be full of life and laughter. Maria spent her first afternoon cleaning guest bedrooms that looked like they hadn't seen visitors in years. The furniture sat beneath protective sheets, and the air smelled stale despite the ventilation system. She worked methodically, grateful for the job even as her muscles ached from unfamiliar movements. This position paid 3 times what her previous cleaning job offered, enough to send money home for her siblings' school expenses and still have some left over for her own tiny apartment in Queens. As evening approached, Mrs. appeared to inspect Maria's work. The older woman moved through the rooms like a general reviewing troops, running her finger along surfaces and checking corners. Finally, she nodded. "Acceptable. Tomorrow you'll start your regular schedule. You'll work Monday through Friday, 8 in the morning until 5 in the evening. You may take your lunch in the staff dining room at noon." Maria thanked her and gathered her bag to leave, but as she walked past the music room on her way to the exit, she heard something that stopped her in her tracks. Music drifted from behind the closed doors, a melody so hauntingly beautiful it seemed to wrap around her heart and squeeze. She recognized it immediately, a sonata she had practiced countless times as a teenager. But this wasn't a recording. Someone was playing live, and whoever held that violin possessed extraordinary skill. Unable to resist, Maria pushed the door open just a crack and peered inside. A man stood silhouetted against the window, his back to her, drawing a bow across one of the instruments from the collection. The music filled the room with such emotion that Maria felt tears spring to her eyes. The way he played spoke of loss and longing, of memories cherished and pain endured. She had never heard anyone make a violin sing with such raw feeling. The man finished the piece and lowered the instrument, his shoulders sagging as though the music had drained something vital from him. Maria must have made a sound because he suddenly turned around. Even from across the room, she could see his face clearly, sharp features beneath dark hair touched with gray at the temples. His eyes, an unusual shade of gray-blue, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm sorry, sir," Maria stammered, stepping back. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was just leaving and heard the music end." Alexander Westbrook stared at the young woman in the doorway, this stranger who had witnessed his private moment of vulnerability. He hadn't played for anyone in 5 years, not since Charlotte's death. The violin had been her instrument of choice, and sometimes, in his darkest moments of grief, he would take out one from his collection and try to summon her memory through music. But he never played when others might hear. "Who are you?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "Maria, sir, I'm the new maid. Today was my first day. I'm very sorry for disturbing you." She began backing away, but he raised a hand. "Wait," Alexander set the violin carefully back in its case, his movements precise and controlled. "You know this music." Maria hesitated, unsure whether answering might get her fired. "Yes, sir. I studied violin for 10 years. That was Violin Sonata number 21 in E minor. It's one of my favorites." Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. "You studied violin?" There was no condescension in his voice, only genuine surprise. "That's unusual." "My mother believed everyone should have access to beauty, regardless of their circumstances," Maria said quietly. "She worked 3 jobs to pay for my lessons. She said music was the language of the soul." Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a crack in the carefully maintained facade. He studied Maria more closely, taking in her worn dress, her work-roughened hands, the intelligence shining in her dark eyes. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." She passed away 2 years ago." "I'm sorry for your loss." The words carried weight, as though he truly understood what loss meant. "My wife died 5 years ago. She played violin beautifully. Sometimes I play her favorite pieces to feel close to her again." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, 2 strangers bound by grief and a shared love of music. Then Alexander seemed to remember himself, straightening his shoulders and rebuilding the walls that had momentarily crumbled. "You may go, Ms. And in the future, please knock if you need to enter a room where I'm present." "Yes, sir, of course. I apologize again." Maria hurried from the room, her heart pounding. She had expected many things from her first day of work, but not that encounter, not that moment of unexpected connection with the mysterious billionaire who owned this mansion. As she rode the subway back to Queens, Maria couldn't stop thinking about Alexander Westbrook. Had described him as a ghost, and there had indeed been something haunted in his eyes when he played that violin. She wondered about his wife, what kind of woman she had been, how she had died. But mostly, Maria thought about the music itself, the way it had called to something deep inside her, reminding her of who she used to be before life forced her to become someone else. That night in her tiny studio apartment with its water-stained ceiling and radiator that clanked like a chain-dragging ghost, Maria opened the bottom drawer of her dresser. Beneath old sweaters and photograph albums, she found what she was looking for, a folder containing sheet music she had kept from her student days. She pulled out the sonata Alexander had been playing and sat on her bed, fingers moving through the air as though holding an invisible bow, remembering the positions, the movements, the feeling of creating something beautiful from wood and strings and rosin. She had given up her dream. She had made her peace with that sacrifice. But hearing that music today had awakened something she thought she had successfully buried, a hunger for the transcendence that only music could provide. Maria knew she needed to be careful. This was just a job, a means to support her family. Getting emotionally involved with the Westbrook household, with its tragic billionaire and his shrine to lost love, would be foolish and dangerous. Yet as she finally turned off the light and tried to sleep, Maria couldn't shake the image of Alexander Westbrook standing in that sunlit room, pouring his grief into melody. She understood that impulse, that desperate need to transform pain into something bearable through art. They came from different worlds, lived different lives, but in that moment when their eyes met across the music room, Maria had recognized a kindred spirit. The next morning, Maria arrived at the mansion at 7:45, again early. She changed into her uniform in the staff locker room, a simple gray dress with a white apron that made her look like she had stepped out of a period drama. Mrs. assigned her to dust the library, a task that would take most of the morning given the thousands of books lining the walls from floor to ceiling. Maria worked carefully, climbing the rolling ladder to reach the highest shelves. The books ranged from leather-bound classics to modern hardcovers, organized by subject and author. She noticed a section devoted entirely to music, biographies of composers, theory books, histories of various instruments and musical periods. Someone in this household took music very seriously indeed. She was dusting a shelf of poetry when she heard footsteps. Turning, she saw Alexander Westbrook enter the library carrying a coffee cup. He wore casual clothes today, dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes seem almost silver. He froze when he saw her, clearly not expecting anyone to be in the room. "Good morning, Mr. Westbrook," Maria said politely, climbing down from the ladder. "I'm just dusting. I can come back later if you need the library." "No, it's fine. Carry on." He moved to one of the reading chairs by the window and sat down, opening a newspaper. But Maria noticed he wasn't really reading. His gaze kept drifting to where she worked, as though he was trying to figure something out. Finally, unable to bear the silence, Maria spoke. "You have an impressive music collection, sir. I noticed it while dusting." Alexander lowered his newspaper. "You like to read about music as well as play it." "I used to when I had time." Maria moved to another shelf, running her cloth carefully over the spines. "My teacher gave me a book about the history of the violin for my 16th birthday. I read it so many times the pages fell out." "What happened?" The question came out before Alexander could stop himself. "You said you studied for 10 years. Why did you stop?" Maria paused, considering how much to reveal to this man who was essentially her employer. But something about the genuine curiosity in his voice made her answer honestly. "My mother got cancer. I had to quit school to care for her and work to pay the medical bills. After she died, I sold my violin to cover the funeral expenses. There wasn't money for music anymore. There wasn't time, either. I had my younger siblings to think about." "How many siblings?" "3 twin brothers who are 17 and a sister who just turned 14. They live with our aunt in Detroit, but I send money every month for their expenses." Alexander set down his newspaper entirely, giving Maria his full attention. "That's a heavy responsibility for someone your age. How old are you, if you don't mind my asking?" 24, sir." He shook his head slowly. "When I was 24, my biggest concern was whether to accept my father's offer to join his company or strike out on my own. I can't imagine having to support an entire family." "We all do what we must," Maria said simply, returning to her dusting. She didn't want his pity, didn't want him to see her as some tragic figure. She had made her choices and lived with them. That was life. But Alexander wasn't finished. "Miss, would you mind playing something for me?" Maria nearly dropped her duster. "Sir." "I'd like to hear you play if you're willing." He stood and walked to the door. "Follow me." Heart-pounding, Maria set down her cleaning supplies and followed Alexander back to the music room. He went directly to the glass cabinet and unlocked it, removing a violin that gleamed like honey in the sunlight. "This is a Carlo from 1732. It has a warm, rich tone. I think you'll appreciate it." He held the instrument out to Maria, who stared at it like he was offering her a bar of solid gold. "Mr. Westbrook, I couldn't. That must be worth approximately $2.4 million, he finished calmly. "But it's meant to be played, not admired behind glass. Please, I'd like to hear what you can do." With trembling hands, Maria accepted the violin. The moment her fingers touched the wood, something clicked into place inside her, like a missing piece of herself returning home. She positioned the first notes that emerged from the violin trembled slightly, Maria's fingers remembering positions they hadn't held in 2 years. But muscle memory proved stronger than time, and within moments she found her rhythm. She chose a piece she knew by heart, Spartita No. 2 in D minor, specifically the famous Chaconne movement. It was ambitious, perhaps too ambitious given her lack of practice, but something about this moment demanded she offer her very best. The music filled the room, and Maria closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the familiar patterns. Her fingers moved across the fingerboard while her bow arm drew out each phrase with careful attention to dynamics and expression. The violin sang under her touch, its tone as rich and warm as Alexander had promised. She had never played an instrument of this quality before. Her student violin had been serviceable but ordinary. This was something else entirely, responding to her slightest gesture, amplifying her musical intentions in ways that made her feel like a true artist rather than an amateur who had once shown promise. When she finished, silence hung in the air for several heartbeats. Maria opened her eyes to find Alexander standing completely still, his face pale, one hand gripping the back of a nearby chair so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a moment Maria worried she had somehow offended him. "Mr. Westbrook," she said tentatively, "I'm sorry if I—" "Don't apologize." His voice came out rough, almost broken. "That was remarkable. You have genuine talent, Ms. More than talent, you have soul. I heard it in every note." He turned away, walking to the window and staring out at the garden. Maria carefully set the violin back in its case, unsure what to do or say. She had clearly stirred something powerful in her employer, emotions he struggled to contain. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Finally, Alexander spoke without turning around. "My wife Charlotte played that same piece. The chaconne was her signature work. She performed it at Carnegie Hall the night I first saw her play." He paused, his shoulders rising and falling with a deep breath. "That was 15 years ago. I was 30 years old, dragged to the concert by a business associate who thought I needed culture in my life. I had no particular interest in classical music at the time. But when Charlotte walked onto that stage and began to play, something inside me shifted forever." Maria listened, hardly daring to breathe, as Alexander's story poured out. She sensed he rarely talked about these things, that his grief had been locked away for so long it now burst forth like water from a broken dam. She was beautiful, of course, but that wasn't what captured me. It was the passion she brought to the music, the way she could make a violin speak directly to your heart. After the concert, I waited by the stage door for 2 hours just to meet her. When she finally came out, I told her she had changed my life. She laughed and said I was being dramatic, but she agreed to have coffee with me anyway. He turned back to face Maria, and she saw the tears now tracking down his cheeks, though he seemed unaware of them. "We were married within a year. Charlotte continued performing, and I started collecting violins so she would always have the finest instruments to play. This music room was her sanctuary. She would spend hours in here, practicing, composing, or simply improvising whatever melody struck her fancy. I would sit right there," he gestured to the chair where he had gripped the back, "and listen to her play. Those were the happiest years of my life." "What happened to her?" Maria asked softly, though she wasn't sure she had the right to know. Alexander walked to a small table and picked up a photograph in a silver frame. He handed it to Maria. The picture showed a slender woman with auburn hair and striking green eyes, holding a violin and laughing at the camera. Joy radiated from her face, the kind of happiness that seemed unshakable. "Pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, there was nothing they could do. She died 6 months after diagnosis. She was only 38. Alexander's voice had gone flat, as though reciting these facts helped him maintain control. "In those final weeks, she was too weak to play, but she would ask me to play for her. I wasn't very good. I had only started learning a few years earlier to better understand her passion. But she said she didn't care about technique. She just wanted to hear the music she loved one more time." He took the photograph back and returned it to its place. "After she died, I couldn't bear to enter this room. For 2 years, it sat empty, gathering dust. Then one night I was very drunk and very angry at the universe, and I came in here and smashed things. I broke 2 chairs and put my fist through that wall over there. You can still see where it was repaired. Mrs. found me on the floor, crying like a child. She helped me clean up and told me that Charlotte would be ashamed to see me destroying the space she loved. That got through to me. I stopped drinking, got myself together, and started playing again. Not well, but playing. It's the only way I still feel connected to her." Maria didn't know what to say. What words could possibly address such profound loss? She thought of her own mother, the hole her death had left in Maria's life, but at least Maria had got to say goodbye, had held her mother's hand as she slipped away peacefully in hospice care. Alexander's grief seemed different, more complicated, woven through with guilt and unfinished business. "Thank you for telling me," Maria finally said. "And I'm so sorry for your loss. She must have been an incredible woman." "She was." Alexander seemed to collect himself, wiping his face and straightening his shoulders. "I apologize for that display of emotion. It was unprofessional." "I don't think grief follows professional boundaries, Mr. Westbrook. It goes where it needs to go." He looked at her with something approaching respect. "You're very wise for someone so young, Ms. I've had to grow up fast." They stood looking at each other, and Maria felt something shift between them, a recognition of shared understanding. They were both survivors of loss, both people who had learned to carry grief while still putting one foot in front of the other each day. The differences in their circumstances, the vast chasm between their social and economic positions, seemed less important in the face of that commonality. "Would you be willing to play for me again?" Alexander asked. "Not today, you have work to do, but perhaps tomorrow or the next day. I'll pay you extra, of course, beyond your regular wages. Say $200 an hour." Maria's eyes widened. $200 an hour was more than she made in an entire day of cleaning. "Mr. Westbrook, that's too much." "It's exactly right. You have a gift, Ms., and gifts should be compensated appropriately. I used to pay Charlotte's accompanists $300 an hour, and they weren't as naturally talented as you are." He pulled out his phone and made a note. "How about this? 3 times a week, say Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you spend the last hour of your workday playing for me. That's an extra $600 a week, $2,400 a month. Will that be acceptable?" Maria did the math quickly. That extra money would mean she could send more home to her siblings, maybe even start saving for her own future. She could pay off the credit card debt she had accumulated during her mother's illness. But more than the money, the chance to play again, to hold these magnificent instruments and make music 3 times a week, felt like being handed back a piece of herself she had thought lost forever. "Yes," she said. "Yes, that would be more than acceptable. Thank you, Mr. Westbrook." "Alexander," he corrected. "If you're going to be my personal musician, we can dispense with excessive formality. When we're in this room, you may call me Alexander." "Then you should call me Maria." He smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face from handsome but severe to something warmer and more approachable. "Very well, Maria. I look forward to our next session. Now, I believe Mrs. is probably wondering where her employee has disappeared to. You should return to your duties before she comes looking for you." Maria nodded and hurried from the room, her mind spinning. What had just happened? She had come to this mansion expecting to clean rooms and stay invisible, but instead she had formed some kind of connection with the billionaire owner, based on mutual grief and a shared love of music. It seemed improbable, almost like something from a novel rather than real life. Over the following weeks, Maria settled into a routine. Her mornings and early afternoons were spent cleaning, dusting, organizing, and helping in the kitchen when needed. But she lived for those final hours of Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, when she would go to the music room and play for Alexander. He usually requested specific pieces, works that Charlotte had loved or performed. Maria learned that his late wife had favored the romantic composers, Brahms and especially, though she had also loved the mathematical precision of. Maria practiced in her apartment during her free time, using her phone to watch tutorials and remember fingerings. She couldn't afford to rent a violin, so she practiced on an imaginary one, going through the motions until they felt natural again. Alexander proved to be an attentive listener. He would sit in his chair, sometimes with his eyes closed, completely absorbed in the music. Occasionally, he would request she play a passage again, slower or with more emphasis on a particular phrase. He never criticized, only offered gentle suggestions, and Maria found herself improving rapidly under this patient guidance. They talked, too. Before or after playing, they would have conversations that ranged from music theory to philosophy to their respective childhoods. Maria learned that Alexander had grown up wealthy but lonely, the only child of parents who were more interested in their social standing than in their son. He had learned early to keep his emotions locked away, to present a controlled facade to the world. Charlotte had been the first person to really see him, to encourage him to feel deeply rather than simply think strategically. In turn, Maria shared stories of her childhood in Detroit, growing up in a neighborhood where gunshots were a nightly soundtrack, but where neighbors still looked out for each other. She told him about her mother's determination to give her children a better life, about the sacrifices that had been made so Maria could have violin lessons, about the scholarship she had earned and then had to decline. "Do you regret it?" Alexander asked one afternoon after she had finished playing Brahms' Violin Sonata No. 1. Giving up your musical education. Maria considered the question carefully. I regret that I had to choose. I wish I could have done both, pursued my dreams and taken care of my family. But I don't regret the choice I made. My siblings needed me. My mother needed me. Music was important, but they were more important. That's very noble. It's not about nobility, it's about love. You do what you have to do for the people you love. Alexander nodded slowly. Charlotte used to say something similar. She turned down a position with the Berlin Philharmonic because I couldn't move my business overseas, and she didn't want us to be apart. I felt guilty about that for years, worried I had held her back from an incredible opportunity. But she insisted she had no regrets, that our life together mattered more than professional glory. She was right, Maria said firmly. Experiences can be replaced, people can't. As the weeks turned into months, Maria noticed changes in Alexander. He smiled more often, engaged more with the household staff, started taking meals in the dining room instead of isolated in his study. Mrs. commented one day that it was like watching someone wake up from a long sleep. The other staff members noticed too, and they credited Maria with the transformation, though she tried to deflect the praise. Truth was, Maria was changing as well. Playing music regularly had rekindled something inside her, a sense of purpose and identity beyond just being a provider for her family. She started listening to classical music during her commute, attended free concerts in Central Park on weekends, and began studying music theory again through online courses. The artistic part of herself that she had suppressed for practical reasons was reasserting itself, and she found she liked who she was becoming. One Friday in late autumn, after Maria had been working at the mansion for 4 months, Alexander made an unexpected announcement. I have a proposal for you, he said as she was putting away the violin she had just played. There's a charity gala next month, raising money for music education programs in underfunded schools. They always have live music, usually a string quartet or a pianist. I'm one of the event's sponsors, and I suggested they feature a solo violinist this year. I recommended you. Maria stared at him, certain she had misheard. Me, Mr. Westbrook, Alexander. I'm not a professional. I'm a maid who happens to play violin as a side job. You're a musician who happens to work as a maid, he corrected. There's a difference. I've heard you play, Maria. You're good enough to perform at this level, better than good enough. And the cause aligns perfectly with your own story. You're exactly the kind of person these programs are meant to help, someone with talent who needs access to opportunities. I don't have the right clothes for a gala. I don't have experience performing in front of hundreds of people. What if I freeze up? What if I embarrass you? Alexander stood and walked over to her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. You won't embarrass me, and we'll take care of the practical details. I'll hire someone to help you choose appropriate attire. We'll arrange for you to practice on the venue's stage beforehand so you're comfortable with the space and the acoustics. And if you truly don't want to do this, I'll respect that decision. But Maria, you have a gift. Don't you think it's time to share it with more than just one person in a private music room? Maria's mind raced. The scared, practical part of her wanted to refuse, to stay safe in her routine where the stakes were low and failure wouldn't be public. But another part, the part that had once dreamed of concert halls and standing ovations, whispered that maybe this was her chance. Not the chance she had originally imagined, not the carefully planned path of education and career building, but a chance nonetheless. What would I play? She asked, and Alexander's face lit up with a smile because he knew that question meant she was considering it. Whatever you want, whatever speaks to you. This is your moment, Maria, make it yours. That night, Maria lay awake in her apartment, thinking about the gala. She thought about her mother, who had believed so strongly in the power of music to transform lives. She thought about her siblings, who needed to see that taking risks could lead to rewards. She thought about herself, about the person she had been, and Alexander's response came within minutes despite the early hour. I'm glad. Come to the music room an hour early on Monday. We'll figure it out together. Maria smiled in the darkness of her bedroom, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. She had just agreed to perform at a high society charity gala, an event that would likely be attended by some of the wealthiest and most influential people in New York. The girl from Detroit who cleaned houses for a living was about to step onto a stage in front of Manhattan's elite. It seemed absurd and impossible and absolutely perfect all at the same time. Monday morning arrived with gray skis that threatened snow. Maria took extra care with her appearance, though she would just be wearing her maid's uniform as usual. Something about today felt significant, like a threshold she was about to cross. She arrived at the mansion early and went straight to the music room, where she found Alexander already waiting with coffee and pastries from a nearby bakery. "I thought we might need fuel for this discussion," he said, gesturing to the spread he had laid out on a small table. "Help yourself." They spent the next hour discussing possible pieces for the gala performance. Alexander suggested several of Charlotte's favorites, but Maria gently pushed back. "I appreciate that you want to honor her memory," she said, "but this needs to be my own statement, not an echo of someone else. I need to play something that represents who I am and where I've come from." Alexander nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You're right, I'm sorry. What did you have in mind?" Maria had been thinking about this since she agreed to perform. "I want to play something that speaks to struggle and triumph, to the journey from darkness into light. I keep coming back to summer from the Four Seasons. Specifically the third movement, the presto. It's fierce and passionate, full of storm and fury, but it resolves into something beautiful. That feels like my story." "It's technically demanding," Alexander warned. "Fast passages, dramatic shifts in dynamics. Are you confident you can master it in less than a month?" "No," Maria admitted, "but I'm confident I can try. And if I'm going to fail, I'd rather fail attempting something meaningful than succeed at something safe." Alexander laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "Charlotte would have loved you. She had that same fearless approach to music. All right, summer it is, but we're going to need to increase your practice time. How would you feel about coming in on Saturdays as well? I'll pay you the same hourly rate for playing, and you can use the music room for as long as you need." Over the following weeks, Maria threw herself into preparation with an intensity she hadn't felt since her student days. She practiced every spare moment, both in the music room and at home with her invisible violin. She watched recordings of famous violinists performing the piece, studying their techniques and interpretations. She worked on building up the speed and precision her fingers would need for those rapid 16th-note passages that characterized the presto movement. Alexander became her coach and her cheerleader. He would sit through repetition after repetition of difficult sections, offering encouragement and occasional technical advice. He brought in a professional violinist he knew to give Maria a few coaching sessions, though the woman confirmed what Alexander already believed, that Maria had the talent and the heart to pull off this performance. The rest of the household staff buzzed with excitement about Maria's upcoming debut, baked special treats to keep Maria's energy up during long practice sessions. Even Mrs., usually so stern and proper, showed a softer side, adjusting Maria's work schedule to give her more time to prepare and occasionally stopping by the music room to listen for a few minutes. But not everything was smooth sailing. One Saturday afternoon, 3 weeks before the gala, Maria hit a wall. She had been practicing for 6 hours straight, and her fingers felt clumsy, her bow arm tired. She kept making mistakes in a particular passage, and the more she tried to fix it, the worse it got. Finally, in frustration, she set down the violin more forcefully than she intended and put her face in her hands. "I can't do this," she said, her voice muffled. "I'm fooling myself. I'm a cleaning lady, not a concert violinist. What am I thinking trying to perform for all those fancy people? They're going to see right through me. They're going to know I don't belong there." Alexander, who had been reading in his chair, set down his book and came to stand beside her. "Look at me, Maria." When she raised her head, he continued, "You're right about one thing. You don't belong at that gala for the reasons you're thinking. You don't belong there because of money or social status or the right family connections. You belong there because you have something those fancy people need to hear. You belong there because your music has the power to move hearts and change minds. And you belong there because you've worked harder than most of them will ever work for anything in their privileged lives." "But what if I mess up? What if I forget the notes or my hands shake or—" "Then you'll be human," Alexander interrupted. "Perfect performances are boring. It's the ones where you can hear the artist's vulnerability, their humanity, that truly touch people. Charlotte taught me that. She said the mistakes are what make the music real as long as you keep your heart in it." Maria wiped her eyes, taking a shaky breath. "I'm scared." "Good, fear means you care. It means this matters to you. But don't let fear stop you from showing the world what you can do." He picked up the violin and handed it back to her. "Now let's take it from the top, but slower this time. We're not practicing for perfection. We're practicing for truth." They worked through the problematic passage again, but this time Alexander had Maria play it at half speed, focusing on the emotional content rather than technical precision. Gradually, she found her way back into the music, and the notes that had been eluding her suddenly clicked into place. By the time they finished for the day, Maria felt exhausted but hopeful again. As the gala drew closer, Alexander took care of the practical details he had promised. A personal shopper named arrived at the mansion one afternoon with an array of evening gowns for Maria to try. Maria felt overwhelmed by the choices, all these beautiful dresses in jewel tones and flowing fabrics, but had an expert eye. "This one," she said, pulling out a deep burgundy gown with a fitted bodice and a skirt that would allow free movement. "It's elegant but not overly formal, and the color will look stunning against your skin tone. Plus, see how the sleeves are designed? They won't restrict your bow arm." Maria tried it on and had to admit was right. The dress made her look and feel like someone who belonged on a concert stage. Also arranged for a hairstylist and a makeup artist to come to the mansion on the evening of the gala to help Maria prepare. The night before the performance, Maria could barely sleep. She lay in bed running through the piece in her mind, hearing every note, feeling every bow stroke. She thought about her mother, wishing desperately that she could be there to see this moment. She thought about her siblings, hoping they would be proud of her. And she thought about Alexander, about the strange and wonderful friendship that had developed between them, built on shared grief and the healing power of music. The day of the gala dawned cold and clear. Maria went through her morning routine in a daze, her mind already at the Plaza Hotel, where the event would be held that evening. Alexander had arranged for a car to pick her up from her apartment at 5 o'clock, giving her plenty of time to dress and prepare before the performance scheduled for 8. When the sleek black car pulled up outside her building, Maria felt like Cinderella heading to the ball. The driver, a kind older gentleman named Joseph, helped her with her garment bag and makeup case, chatting pleasantly about the weather and the traffic as they made their way into Manhattan. At the plaza, he delivered her to a private suite where the stylist and makeup artist were waiting. The transformation took 2 hours. Maria watched in the mirror as skilled hands turned her into someone she barely recognized. Her hair, usually pulled back in a simple ponytail for work, was styled into an elegant updo with a few curls framing her face. Her makeup was subtle but impactful, emphasizing her eyes and highlighting her bone structure. When she finally slipped into the burgundy gown and stepped into the heels had chosen, Maria saw a confident, beautiful woman staring back at her from the mirror. "You look like a star," the stylist said with satisfaction. "Go show them what you've got." A knock on the door announced Alexander's arrival. Maria opened it to find him in a tailored tuxedo, looking every inch the billionaire he was. But what struck her most was the expression on his face when he saw her. His eyes widened, and for a moment he seemed unable to speak. "Maria," he finally said, "you look absolutely beautiful." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you, you clean up pretty well yourself." He offered her his arm. "Shall we? I thought we could walk the ballroom together before the guests arrive, let you get comfortable with the space." The plaza's ballroom took Maria's breath away. Massive chandeliers hung from ornate ceilings, casting warm light over tables draped in white linens and set with crystal and silver. A stage had been erected at one end of the room, and on it stood a music stand and a single chair. That was where she would perform, in front of all these elegant tables that would soon be filled with New York's elite. "The acoustics are excellent," Alexander said, leading her toward the stage. "And see how the lights are positioned. They'll focus on you while keeping the audience in relative shadow, so you won't be distracted by faces. Just focus on the music stand or close your eyes if that helps." They spent 30 minutes going over last-minute details. A sound technician checked the microphone levels, though Alexander had insisted they keep amplification minimal to preserve the natural sound of the violin. The event coordinator confirmed the schedule. Maria would perform right after dinner, before the speeches and the auction began. Then the guests started arriving, and Maria retreated to a small room offstage that had been set aside for her use. She could hear the buzz of conversation growing louder as the ballroom filled with people. Through a crack in the door, she peeked out and saw the tables filling up with men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns, everyone laughing and chatting and sipping champagne. These were the people who ran the city, who sat on corporate boards and charitable foundations, who had summer homes in the Hamptons and winter escapes in the Caribbean. And in a little over an hour, she would be playing for them. Maria did breathing exercises her old violin teacher had taught her to calm performance nerves. She ran through difficult passages in her mind, feeling her fingers move through the positions. She thought about why she was doing this, not for fame or recognition, but to honor her mother's belief in the power of music, to prove that talent existed everywhere regardless of economic circumstances, and to remind herself that she was more than just someone who cleaned other people's homes. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Alexander entered, carrying the violin case. "I thought you might want a few minutes alone with this before you go on," he said, setting it carefully on the table. "And I wanted to give you something." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate silver necklace with a small violin charm. "This belonged to Charlotte," he said quietly. "She wore it at her Carnegie Hall debut. I thought it might bring you luck, and I know she would have wanted you to have it for tonight." Maria felt tears threatening to ruin her carefully applied makeup. "Alexander, I can't accept this. It's too precious." "Please," he said, "let her be with you up there. Let her music live on through yours." He stepped behind Maria and carefully fastened the necklace around her neck. The small violin charm rested just above her heart. "Thank you," Maria whispered, touching the charm. "I'll make you both proud." "You already have." Alexander squeezed her shoulder gently. "I need to take my seat, but I'll be right there in the front, watching every moment. You've got this, Maria. Just remember, play from your heart, not your head. The technical stuff will take care of itself." After he left, Maria opened the violin case and lifted out the... She had played this instrument dozens of times over the past months, but tonight it felt different, heavier with significance. She rosined her bow carefully, checked her tuning, and played through a few scales to warm up her fingers. The sound filled the small room, rich and resonant, and Maria felt her nervousness begin to transform into focused energy. A stagehand appeared at her door. "5 minutes, Ms." Maria nodded, taking one last deep breath. She thought of her mother working 3 jobs so her daughter could have violin lessons. She thought of her siblings back in Detroit, counting on her to be strong. She thought of Alexander, who had given her this incredible opportunity. And she thought of Charlotte, the woman she had never met but felt connected to through music and through Alexander's stories. The stagehand returned. "You're on." Maria picked up and walked toward the stage. The master of ceremonies was introducing her, though she barely heard the words over the pounding of her heart. Then she was stepping into the light, walking across the stage to polite applause, taking her position by the music stand even though she had the piece memorized and wouldn't need to look at the sheet music placed there. She looked out at the sea of faces, though they were mostly in shadow as Alexander had promised. But she could see him in the front row, his eyes locked on hers, giving her an encouraging nod. Maria raised her violin, positioned her bow, and in that instant before the first note, everything else fell away. There was only the music, waiting to be born from wood and strings and the movement of her hands. She began to play the person she was becoming. The opening notes of Summer Presto movement cut through the elegant ballroom like lightning through a summer sky. Maria's bow attacked the strings with controlled fury, her fingers flying across the fingerboard in the rapid passages that characterized this tempestuous piece. The music depicted a violent thunderstorm, and Maria channeled every fear, every doubt, every moment of struggle from the past 2 years into those fierce 16th notes. The ballroom had gone absolutely silent except for the violin's voice. The clinking of silverware stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye in the room focused on the young woman on stage, this unknown performer who was pouring her soul into masterwork. Maria's eyes were closed now, her body swaying with the music's rhythm, completely lost in the world she was creating through sound. She reached the section that had given her so much trouble in practice, those cascading runs that required perfect precision and breakneck speed. Her fingers moved with a confidence born of countless repetitions, but more than that, with a passion that transcended technique. This wasn't just about playing the notes correctly. This was about telling a story, her story, of weathering storms and emerging stronger on the other side. The music built to its climax, the storm at its most violent, and Maria's bow flew across the strings with an intensity that made her arms burn. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the ballroom's climate control. Her heart hammered in her chest. And then, just as intended, the fury began to subside. The storm passed. The final measures brought resolution, a sense of peace after chaos, of sunshine breaking through clouds. Maria played the last note and let it ring out, sustaining it until it faded naturally into silence. For a moment, nothing happened. The ballroom remained frozen, suspended in the echo of what they had just witnessed. Maria opened her eyes, suddenly terrified that she had somehow failed, that the silence meant disapproval. Then Alexander stood, his hands coming together in applause. The sound broke the spell, and suddenly the entire ballroom erupted. People rose to their feet, clapping thunderously, some wiping tears from their eyes. The ovation went on, and Maria stood on that stage in shock, hardly able to process what was happening. She had done it, not just survived the performance, but truly moved these people who had probably heard countless professional musicians over the years. She had made them feel something real, had connected with them through the universal language of music. Maria felt tears streaming down her own face as she bowed, clutching the violin to her chest. The master of ceremonies returned to the stage, having to wait for the applause to die down before he could speak. "Ladies, and wasn't that extraordinary? Maria, everyone." Another wave of applause. "Ms. is not a professional musician, though I think we can all agree she should be. She actually works as a household staff member, and she taught herself to play at this level while supporting her family and overcoming tremendous obstacles. She is exactly the kind of talented young person that the music education programs we're supporting tonight are designed to help. Maria, would you mind staying on stage for just a moment?" Maria nodded, confused, as the event coordinator walked onto the stage carrying an envelope. The master of ceremonies opened it and read, "We have a surprise announcement. An anonymous donor has been so moved by Maria's performance tonight that they have made a special donation of $500,000 to establish a scholarship fund in her name. The Maria Music Scholarship will provide full funding for talented young musicians from underprivileged backgrounds to receive professional training and education." Maria's hand flew to her mouth. $500,000, a scholarship in her name. She looked at Alexander, who was smiling through his own tears, and she knew instantly that he was the anonymous donor. He had not only given her this platform, but was now creating opportunities for others like her. The generosity, the thoughtfulness, the sheer kindness of the gesture overwhelmed her. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. After she left the stage, Maria was surrounded by well-wishers, people wanting to congratulate her, to hear her story, to offer encouragement and connections. A woman who ran a chamber music society gave Maria her card and asked if she would consider performing at their next season opening. A talent agent suggested they talk about representation. A music professor asked if she had ever considered completing her formal education. Through it all, Maria kept catching glimpses of Alexander across the room. He was engaged in conversations with other donors, fulfilling his social obligations, but every so often their eyes would meet, and he would smile at her, a private acknowledgement of the special thing they had shared in creating this moment. Finally, near midnight, the gala began to wind down. Maria had changed back into her regular clothes, though she kept Charlotte's necklace on, unable to bear removing it yet. She found Alexander in the now mostly empty ballroom, supervising the event staff as they began cleaning up. "You were magnificent," he said when he saw her. "Even better than in practice. You found something extra up there on that stage." "I found my courage," Maria said. "Thanks to you. Alexander, the scholarship, that was you, wasn't it? $500,000. He didn't deny it. "Consider it an investment in the future. There are probably thousands of kids out there with your talent but without access to training. This way, some of them will get their chance." "I don't know how to thank you." "You just did by playing tonight, by showing everyone in this room what's possible when talent meets opportunity." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Maria, I need to tell you something. These past months, working with you, listening to you play, watching you grow as a musician, it's brought me back to life in ways I didn't think possible. Charlotte's death broke something in me, and I thought it would stay broken forever. But you've helped me heal. Your music, your spirit, your determination, it's reminded me that beauty still exists in the world, that there are still things worth caring about." Maria felt her heart skip. The way he was looking at her, the intensity in his voice, suggested this was more than just gratitude for good service. "Alexander, I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable," he continued quickly. "I know there's a power imbalance in our relationship. You work for me, and I would never want to put you in an awkward position. But I needed you to know that you've changed my life, Maria, and whatever happens next, whatever choices you make, I will always be grateful that our paths crossed." They stood looking at each other in the dimly lit ballroom, the air heavy with unspoken possibilities. Maria knew she should probably say something professional, something that would maintain the appropriate boundaries between employer and employee. But her heart had other ideas, and for once, she decided to listen to it instead of her practical mind. "You've changed my life too," she said softly. You gave me back my music. You believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. These months in your music room, playing for you, learning from you, they've been some of the happiest of my life despite everything I've lost. So whatever this is between us, I'm grateful for it too. Alexander reached out and gently took her hand. I'd like to keep teaching you, keep working with you musically, but I think we should make it official. How would you feel about becoming my private music student instead of my maid? I'll pay you the same total amount, but as a music scholarship rather than wages for cleaning. That way you can focus entirely on developing your talent, and maybe there won't be quite so much weirdness about me, well, about us being friends. Are we friends? Maria asked, surprised to hear herself being so bold. I'd like to think so, though I hope in time we might become even more than that. He squeezed her hand. But there's no pressure, Maria. You get to decide what you're comfortable with. I just want you to know that I care about you, not just as a talented musician, but as a person. A remarkable person who has taught me that it's okay to feel again, to hope again, to open my heart to new possibilities. Maria's mind raced. Was he suggesting what she thought he was suggesting? That there could be something romantic between them? The idea should have seemed absurd. He was a billionaire, 15 years her senior, her employer, living in a completely different world. But somehow, none of that mattered when she looked into his eyes and saw genuine emotion there, saw vulnerability and hope and something that looked an awful lot like the beginning of love. I care about you too, she admitted. More than I probably should, given the circumstances, but I can't deny what I feel. These months have been confusing and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Then let's take it slow, Alexander suggested. Let's start with friendship and musical collaboration and see where that leads us naturally. No expectations, no pressure, just two people who enjoy each other's company and share a love of music. Is that something you'd be open to? Maria nodded, a smile breaking across her face. Yes, I'd like that very much. Over the following weeks, Maria's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. She officially resigned from her cleaning position, though Mrs. threw her a small going-away party in the staff dining room, everyone wishing her well in this new phase of her life. Alexander hired a new maid and converted one of the guest rooms into a proper music studio for Maria, complete with sheet music, a recording system, and multiple violins for her to practice on. True to his word, Alexander approached their relationship with patience and care. They spent hours together in the music room, but now as equals rather than employer and employee. He shared his own musical knowledge, limited though it was compared to hers, and she taught him things about phrasing and interpretation that deepened his appreciation for the art form he had loved since meeting Charlotte. They also spent time together outside the mansion. Alexander took Maria to concerts at Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center, introducing her to the world of professional classical music. They had long dinners at restaurants where they talked about everything from politics to philosophy to their dreams for the future. Slowly, carefully, they were building something real, a connection based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Maria also reconnected with her siblings. With the scholarship money Alexander had set up, plus her new income as his music student, she was able to bring them to New York for a visit during their winter break. They stayed at a nice hotel that Alexander arranged, and Maria showed them the city, taking them to Times Square and Central Park and the Statue of Liberty. Her sister, now 15, was particularly excited about Maria's musical comeback. "Mom would be so proud of you," she said one night as they sat in the hotel room eating pizza. "She always knew you were special. She always said you were going to do important things." "I'm not doing anything that important," Maria protested. "I'm just playing violin." "You're showing people like us that we can have dreams too," her brother said. "You're proving that where you come from doesn't have to define where you end up. That's pretty important if you ask me." Those words stayed with Maria long after her siblings returned to Detroit. She realized that her journey had become about more than personal fulfillment. Whether she intended it or not, she was becoming a symbol of possibility, proof that talent and determination could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. The scholarship fund Alexander had created in her name began accepting applications, and Maria was invited to be part of the selection committee. Reading through the essays from young musicians all over the country, each one sharing their struggles and dreams, moved her to tears. These were her people, kids who loved music but couldn't afford lessons, who practiced on borrowed instruments and dreamed of opportunities that seemed forever out of reach. The committee selected 5 recipients for the first year, and Maria got to meet each of them when they came to New York for a welcome event. There was, a 14-year-old cellist from Atlanta whose single mother worked 2 jobs. There was a 17-year-old pianist from Los Angeles who had taught herself to play on a keyboard at the community center. There was Carlos, a 16-year-old trumpet player from Phoenix who practiced in his car because his apartment was too small and too loud. Meeting these young people reminded Maria of why she had sacrificed her own dreams, and why getting them back now felt like a gift rather than something she deserved. She spent time with each scholarship recipient, sharing her own story, offering encouragement, and promising to be available if they ever needed advice or support. One evening in early spring, about 8 months after that first day when Maria had walked into the Westbrook mansion as a nervous new maid, she and Alexander sat in the music room watching the sun set over the garden. Cherry blossoms were blooming, painting the world in shades of pink and white, and Maria had just finished playing a new piece she was working on, Violin concerto in E minor. "You've improved so much," Alexander observed. "Your technique was always good, but now there's a maturity to your playing, a depth of emotion that takes most musicians years to develop." "I have a good teacher," Maria said with a smile, "and good motivation. I want to be worthy of all the opportunities you've given me." Alexander was quiet for a moment, watching the cherry blossoms drift past the window. "Maria, there's something I've been wanting to ask you, but I wasn't sure if the timing was right. I think I'm finally ready." Maria's heart began to beat faster. She had been wondering when this conversation might happen, had been half hoping for it and half dreading it because of what it might mean for the comfortable friendship they had built. Alexander stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured, as though he had rehearsed these words many times. "I've been thinking about Charlotte a lot lately, not in the painful way I used to, where every memory felt like a knife wound. Now the memories make me smile. I can remember our life together with gratitude instead of just grief, and I have you to thank for that, Maria. You've helped me heal in ways I didn't think possible." He turned to face her. "But here's what I've realized. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean replacing what I lost. Charlotte will always be part of me, always be the woman who taught me how to love deeply and live fully. But she's gone, and I'm still here. And I hope that she would want me to be happy again, to open my heart to new possibilities, to new people." Maria stood, setting down her violin carefully. Her pulse raced as she walked to join him by the window. "What are you saying, Alexander?" "I'm saying that somewhere along the way, you stopped being just my music student or even just my friend. You became someone I think about first thing in the morning and last thing at night. Someone whose smile can change my entire day. Someone I want to share things with, not because I should, but because joy feels incomplete if you're not there to experience it with me." He reached out and gently took her hands in his. "I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, Maria. Maybe I already have fallen. And I needed you to know, even though I'm terrified of how you might respond." Maria felt tears pricking her eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "Scared of how different we are, how people will judge us, how complicated this could get. But Alexander, none of that fear is stronger than what I feel when I'm with you. You've given me back my music, yes, but you've also given me permission to dream again, to believe I deserve beautiful things. And you're the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me." "So you feel it too?" Alexander's voice was barely above a whisper. "This thing between us." "Yes," Maria breathed. "I've been trying not to, trying to be sensible and practical like I always am. But my heart doesn't care about sensible. It just knows that when I'm with you, I feel complete in a way I never have before." Alexander released one of her hands to gently cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down her face. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and Maria loved him even more for asking permission, for treating this moment with the reverence it deserved. "Please," she said, and then his lips were on hers, soft and gentle and full of promise. The kiss lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like crossing a threshold into a new world, a world where a billionaire and a former maid could find love in a music room full of expensive violins and memories of those who had come before. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. "What happens now?" Maria asked. "I mean, practically speaking, this is going to be complicated." "Everything worth having is complicated," Alexander said. "But we'll figure it out together. We'll take it at whatever pace feels right for you. We don't have to tell the world anything until you're ready. And if you're never ready, if you decide this is too much or too weird or just not what you want, I'll understand and we can go back to being friends. Your happiness matters more to me than my own desires." Maria shook her head firmly. "Don't you dare take it back now that you've finally said it. I'm all in, Alexander Westbrook. Scared out of my mind, but all in. I want this. I want us. I want to see where this goes." They spent the rest of that evening talking about what a relationship between them might look like. Alexander suggested they keep things private for a while, not because he was ashamed, but because he wanted to protect Maria from the media scrutiny that would inevitably come if people learned that one of New York's wealthiest men was dating someone from such different circumstances. Maria appreciated his thoughtfulness, though part of her bristled at the idea of hiding, of suggesting their relationship was something shameful. "I'm not ashamed of you," Alexander assured her when she expressed this concern. "Never think that, but the tabloids can be vicious, and they'll try to make this into some kind of scandal or depending on which sells more papers. I just want us to have time to build something real before we have to defend it to the world." Maria understood his point, even if she didn't entirely like it. So they agreed to keep their romantic relationship private for now, continuing to present themselves as teacher and student to the outside world. It felt dishonest in some ways, but Maria also recognized the wisdom in building a strong foundation before facing external pressures. The next few months were some of the happiest of Maria's life. She and Alexander fell into a rhythm that felt natural despite the unusual circumstances. During the day, they maintained professional boundaries, working on her musical development with the same intensity they had before. But evenings were theirs, time for long conversations, quiet dinners, walks through Central Park where they could be anonymous in the crowd. Alexander was a thoughtful partner, always considering Maria's comfort and preferences. He never tried to change her or mold her into some society wife version of herself. Instead, he seemed to delight in her authenticity, her directness, her refusal to be impressed by wealth or status. Maria, in turn, helped Alexander reconnect with a sense of playfulness he had lost over the years. She introduced him to her world, taking him to her favorite taco place in Queens, teaching him to play cards the way her family had on lazy Sunday afternoons, showing him that joy existed in simple pleasures as much as in expensive luxuries. But maintaining secrecy proved more challenging than either had anticipated. Mrs. noticed the way Alexander looked at Maria when he thought no one was watching, commented that Mr. Westbrook seemed happier than he had in years, and wasn't it interesting how that coincided with Maria's increased presence in the house? The other staff members whispered among themselves, speculating about what might be developing between the billionaire and the young woman who had started as a maid. The situation came to a head one afternoon when Alexander's sister Victoria showed up unexpectedly at the mansion. Victoria was 3 years younger than Alexander, a sharp-featured woman who ran a successful investment firm and had very strong opinions about everything. She had been traveling abroad for the past year and had not yet met Maria. Maria was in the music room practicing when Victoria arrived, and she didn't hear the commotion in the foyer. She also didn't hear Victoria tell Mrs. that she was looking for her brother, or Mrs.'s response that Mr. Westbrook was probably in the music room listening to his student practice. So when the music room door suddenly flew open and a strange woman marched in, Maria jumped, nearly dropping her bow. "So you're the famous Maria I've been hearing about," Victoria said, her eyes scanning Maria from head to toe in a way that made Maria feel like a specimen under a microscope. "My brother has been very mysterious about his new music student. Now I see why." Before Maria could respond, Alexander appeared in the doorway, his face flushed with annoyance. "Victoria, you can't just barge in here. Maria is in the middle of practice." "And you can't just take up with the help without people talking, Alex," Victoria shot back. "Oh yes, I've heard the gossip. My brother, the grieving widower, suddenly comes back to life for a girl young enough to be his daughter who used to clean his toilets. The optics are terrible." Maria felt her face burn with humiliation and anger. She carefully set down the violin and stood tall, meeting Victoria's critical gaze directly. "With respect, Ms. Westbrook, I'm 24 years old, not a child, and I've never cleaned your brother's toilets. I was a professional house cleaner who happened to also be a trained musician. Alexander recognized my talent and has been kind enough to nurture it. Whatever gossip you've heard is just that. Gossip from people who have nothing better to do than speculate about other people's lives." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "She has fire, I'll give her that. But fire doesn't change facts, sweetheart. You're from different worlds. This," she gestured between Maria and Alexander, "whatever this is, it's not going to end well. People will assume you're a gold digger. They'll say terrible things about you. And Alexander's reputation will suffer because people will think he's having some kind of crisis, rebounding from grief with the first pretty face that showed him attention. That's enough. Alexander's voice was steel. Victoria, I love you, but you don't get to come into my home and insult someone I care about. Maria is not some opportunist. She's talented, intelligent, and has more integrity than most people I know in our so-called social circle. And yes, I care about her. More than care about her. I'm in love with her, and that's not going to change because you or anyone else disapproves. The room fell silent. Maria's heart hammered in her chest. Alexander had just confessed his love for her to his sister, had defended her against accusations she had feared from the beginning. She felt simultaneously grateful and terrified, knowing this confrontation would likely be the first of many they would face. Victoria studied her brother for a long moment, then turned back to Maria with a slightly less hostile expression. He really loves you, doesn't he? I can see it in his face. I haven't seen him look at anyone like that since Charlotte. She sighed, some of the fight going out of her. Look, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to be realistic. The world can be ugly, especially to people in relationships that don't fit conventional expectations. If you two are serious about this, you need to be prepared for scrutiny and judgment. We are serious, Alexander said firmly, and we're prepared to face whatever comes, but I'd hoped my own family would be supportive rather than another obstacle to overcome. Victoria moved to one of the chairs and sat down heavily. I'm not an obstacle, Alex. I'm worried about you. You went through hell when Charlotte died. You're finally happy again, and I don't want to see you get hurt. Either of you, she added, glancing at Maria. Because if Alex loves you and you hurt him, I will make your life very difficult. I would never intentionally hurt him, Maria said quietly. I know how much he's already suffered. I know what Charlotte meant to him. I'm not trying to replace her or compete with her memory. I'm just trying to be someone who makes his present a little brighter and maybe his future something worth looking forward to. Victoria studied Maria for another long moment, then something in her expression softened. You know what? Charlotte would have liked you. She always said Alex needed someone who wouldn't put up with his nonsense, someone genuine who would call him out when he was being ridiculous. She had a gift for seeing people's true nature beneath the surface polish. She stood and walked over to Maria, extending her hand. I apologize for being harsh. I've been protective of my brother since we were children, and I sometimes forget he's capable of making his own decisions. If he loves you, there must be good reasons. I'd like the chance to discover them for myself, if you're willing. Maria shook her hand, relief flooding through her. I'd like that too. The crisis with Victoria turned out to be a blessing in disguise. After their rocky start, Victoria became one of Maria's strongest advocates. She invited Maria to lunch the following week, just the two of them, and they talked for 3 hours about everything from music to family to what it was like loving someone who had loved deeply before. Victoria shared stories about Alexander and Charlotte, helping Maria understand the man she had fallen for and the marriage that had shaped him. Charlotte used to say that love isn't a finite resource, Victoria told Maria over dessert. She said you don't love someone new less because you loved someone before. You just expand your capacity for love. I think she'd be glad Alexander found someone like you, someone who brings him joy without asking him to forget his past. Armed with Victoria's support, Maria and Alexander decided it was time to stop hiding. They made their relationship public at a charity concert 3 months after Victoria's surprise visit. Alexander had arranged for Maria to perform again, this time at a sold-out event at Alice Hall. When she finished her performance to thunderous applause, Alexander walked onto the stage with a bouquet of roses and in front of hundreds of people kissed her. The next day they were all over the tabloids. Billionaire's new love, from Maid to Maestro, read one headline. Westbrook's surprising romance with former housekeeper, proclaimed another. The stories ranged from genuinely supportive to borderline offensive, speculating about everything from Maria's motivations to whether Alexander was having a midlife crisis. But Maria discovered she cared less about public opinion than she had feared. She had Alexander's love, Victoria's friendship, and a growing career as a musician. The scholarship program bearing her name had expanded to support 15 students. She was scheduled to perform with a chamber orchestra the following month and had been invited to give a TED Talk about music education and economic inequality. Her siblings were proud of her, calling every week to check in and share their own news. Had started taking violin lessons with money Maria sent, showing early signs of her own musical talent. The twins had both been accepted to good colleges with partial scholarships, and while they would still need help with expenses, Maria was finally in a position to provide it without sacrificing her own dreams. 1 year to the day after Maria had first walked into the Westbrook mansion as a nervous new maid, Alexander took her back to the music room where their story had begun. The space looked different now, more lived in, with sheet music scattered across stands and multiple violins in various states of readiness. Charlotte's photograph still held its place of honor, but now it was joined by newer photos, images of Maria performing, of Alexander and Maria together, of the scholarship recipients they had met. "I have something for you," Alexander said, pulling a small box from his pocket. But it wasn't the ring box Maria half expected. Instead, when he opened it, she saw a key. "This is the key to the music room," he explained. "I know you already have access, but I wanted you to have this as a symbol. This room was Charlotte's sanctuary, and I've been its guardian since she died, keeping it perfect and pristine like a shrine. But you've helped me understand that the best way to honor her memory isn't to preserve everything exactly as she left it. It's to fill this space with music again, with life and growth and new possibilities. I want you to truly make this room yours, Maria. Add whatever you need, change whatever you want. Make it the place where you create your own legacy." Maria took the key, understanding the significance of what Alexander was offering. He was fully letting go of the past, making space for their future. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I don't want you to feel like I'm erasing Charlotte." "You're not erasing her. You're continuing her mission. She believed music could change lives, could bridge divides, could make the world more beautiful. You believe the same things, and you're living proof of those beliefs." He took both her hands in his. "Maria, you walked into my life when I needed hope, when I had forgotten how to feel anything but grief. You gave me back my music, yes, but more than that, you gave me back myself. You showed me it was possible to honor the past while embracing the future. I will always love Charlotte, but I love you too. Differently, but just as deeply. And I want to spend the rest of my life watching you make your mark on the world, supporting your dreams the way you've supported mine." "I love you too," Maria said, tears streaming down her face. "This year has been the most unexpected, extraordinary journey. I came here thinking I was just going to clean rooms and send money home to my family. I never imagined I'd find you, find this life, find myself again. You've given me so much, Alexander." "We've given each other something precious," he corrected. "Neither of us would be who we are now without the other. That's what love is, I think. Not completing each other, but helping each other become more fully ourselves." They stood together in the music room as afternoon light slanted through the windows, casting golden patterns on the floor. Maria picked up her violin, Alexander's gift to her, a beautiful instrument he had purchased specifically for her rather than one from Charlotte's collection. She played a few bars of the melody that had brought them together that first day, the sonata he had been playing when she interrupted him. Alexander smiled at the memory. "Play something new," he suggested, "something that belongs to just us." So Maria played an original composition she had been working on, a piece inspired by her journey from Detroit to New York, from maid to musician, from grief to love. The melody was sometimes melancholy, sometimes joyful, but always honest, capturing the complexity of real life rather than fairy tale simplicity. When she finished, Alexander wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Beautiful," he whispered, "just like you." They stayed like that for a while, watching the sun set over the garden where Charlotte had once walked, where new flowers now bloomed alongside the old. The music room held the past and the present in perfect balance, a testament to the truth that love doesn't replace love, it multiplies it. Maria thought about the young woman who had stood in this mansion's foyer a year ago, terrified of making mistakes, burdened by responsibilities, convinced her dreams were dead. She thought about all the moments since then that had led to this one, the courage required to play that first note, the vulnerability needed to accept help, the strength demanded by love. She thought about her mother, who had scraped together dollars so her daughter could have violin lessons, never knowing those lessons would lead to this. The black maid who played the violin had become so much more than either of those labels. She was Maria, musician, scholarship founder, beloved partner to a man who had taught her that endings could be beginnings, that loss could make space for gain, that sometimes the most beautiful melodies emerged from the most unexpected places. Her story wasn't finished. This was just the beginning of a new movement, a new chapter in a composition still being written one note, one day, one choice at a time. And in the music room where it all began, surrounded by violins that had witnessed countless stories of love and loss, Maria and Alexander stood together, Proof that sometimes the universe brings exactly the right people into each other's lives at exactly the right time. Not to fix what was broken, but to show that broken things can still make beautiful music. You just have to be brave enough to play. "What is it?" she asked. Finally, around 3 in the morning, she sent Alexandra a text message. "I'll do it, but I need your help choosing the right piece to perform." Under her chin, adjusted her stance, and drew the bow across the strings.